and welcome to DBA 700 Foundations of Research Writing. It's week 4 and this is the assignment video. So this week we're going to be talking about the process of using argument and supporting argument with evidence. So here's the way some people like to use their evidence while doing research. Keep in mind there are only two kinds of facts: those that support my position and inconclusive. Sounds like lawyers, right? Anyway, let's look at the required readings for this week. You have 5 different readings, instructional readings. Some of them come from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill Writing Center. Some come from the Purdue Online Writing Center, the OWL Center. We got one from Harvard. And they all take somewhat of a different perspective. Not all of them say exactly the same thing, otherwise there would be no point in having 4. You would just have one. But actually it's a good idea because different schools, different institutions, different instructors, different writing centers have a slightly different way of explaining. They're still talking about the same thing, but they have a slightly different way of explaining it, and consequently you'll get a more balanced perspective, and things that don't make sense to you from one perspective, well, from a different perspective and a different explanation, now they start to make sense. So actually I'm kind of in favor of the idea of reading a number of things about the same topic because you'll get a fuller, broader understanding of it. Okay, but the focus for this week is going to be on the argumentative style of writing. So the thesis statement actually makes a point, something that you're trying to convince the reader to follow and to believe your point of view on. And you're going to do that with peer-reviewed journal articles that supply your evidence, that say, well, this just isn't my opinion. You should really believe what I'm saying because look at all these other people that say the same thing. Okay? So you build your argument based upon evidence, point by point, just like a lawyer might do in building their case. They'll bring up one piece of evidence, the fingerprints, then they'll bring up another piece of evidence, the DNA, then another piece of evidence, eyewitness accounts, and so they build their case on evidence. Well, we're doing the same thing when you write your argumentative style papers. So the discussion this week is also going to be about argument and evidence, and we're going to use as our basis of our discussion 2 articles, again dealing with human motivation, and specifically Maslow, who you should be starting to feel quite comfortable with now. So both of these articles are found in the EBSCOhost database, so you'll just have to copy the title of the article and paste it in to the search, and you'll pick up that article, and then you save as and download it to your computer so you can read it. And the basis of the discussion is how well these articles represented a argument and evidence to support their point of view. Okay, again, these are published, so to a certain extent these have been through the peer review process, but I'd like you to look at them and discuss, critique how well they did the job of using their argument, presenting their argument, and then supporting it with evidence. Right? So the writing assignment for this is going to build upon the work that you started in week number 1, your literature review, and then added to in week number 2, and then revised in week number 3. And this week we're going to go searching for some more literature. Okay, so you're going to go into the Kaiser Online Library and you're going to select 5 more articles related to the paper that you're starting to write. And I would say starting because this is an ongoing process. By the time we're finished, you're going to have probably 10 to 15 pages and many more references as your paper starts to develop and evolve into a real literature review. Okay. This week now, you're not going to be rewriting the entire paper, but what I do want you to do is find 5 articles and choose articles that relate to the approach that you're starting to take, your thesis statement. You want to find things that relate to that, because this is going to be further evidence that your argument is going to be well supported. So find your articles. Then I would like you, of course, to download them, okay? Because you're going to, if you find they're useful, you're going to want to use the entire article. But all I want to see this time is the abstract from the article. So copy the abstract and paste it into a Word document. And after each abstract, explain how that article is going to help support the thesis of your particular paper. Okay, so you're going to have 5 different papers. All will be about human motivation, but they've got to be related to the approach that you're taking in your paper. Okay, so you're going to use the concepts of arguments and evidence to explain why these articles, why these abstracts represent a paper that you might end up using in your final literature review. Now, this does not have to be in APA format, but it should be tied to the week 3 paper if that's the approach you're going to take. Okay. So the steps are: go to the library, search for articles that are relevant to the approach you're taking to your human motivation paper. And in last week's video, I explained how you can find additional literature, how you can search through the databases, and how you can find related based on keywords and based upon Google search. And there's a lot of different ways to search, so you should have no problems doing that. If you haven't seen the previous video, go back and watch the week 3 video. It's still there, and it'll explain how to use different techniques in searching the library. When you find the article that you want, copy and paste the abstract into a Word document, okay, and then write an explanation about how that particular article is going to provide evidence for the literature review. Okay, how about an example? Well, suppose I was writing a paper on human motivation, and the approach I decided to take was that I wanted to look at it from a sort of a more biological and chemical standpoint as opposed to a psychological standpoint. So I found a paper here that talks about how certain chemicals activate certain parts of the brain, and that in lab rat experiments they found that they can change the order in which rats will choose a reward based upon which parts of the brain were being stimulated. Okay, so this is one of the articles that I plan to use in my literature review. And now my explanation, okay, I have to now say, well, why does this particular article look like it's relevant to what I'm going to be doing? Is my thesis on my paper is that human motivation is kind of a combination of things. They're not just conscious choices, rational choices, but it's really a combination of rational, emotional, and also biological factors. Okay? So although this study uses rats as they're not humans, but we find a lot of information about things that happen based upon experiments on animals that we couldn't do with humans. It argues that the motivation to choose one reward over another, again, which is kind of part of the motivational thing, is you get something in return, needs satisfied or something. One reward over another may be related to the effects of stimulation on different parts of the brain. Consequently, what appears to be motivation due to conscious choices may be, in fact, due to the effects of different chemicals on the brain. Okay? So that's what part of what this evidence is going to provide to my particular paper, my argument that biological factors may be more important to motivation in people than we really realize. Genetic factors, for example. A person's genes may cause them to choose one thing over another, okay? Even though it would appear other people might do something different. All right, so that's the idea. So you're going to have 5 of these, 5 abstracts and then 5 explanations describing how that particular article is going to provide evidence to your paper. And this is very important because the whole thing about writing a literature review is supporting why that is important to the thesis. So simply having one source that says this, and you claim that one source explains everything, well, when you're talking about a subject as broad as human motivation, there are lots of different people who have said lots of different things about it. So you've got to narrow it down and pick something that's specific to the topic that you want to work with, which part of this huge body of literature you want to deal with. And part of this, again, goes to the idea that we're working with a deeper form of knowledge. At a doctoral level, you should be able to do more than simply copy information from one place and explain it someplace else. Okay, so basically, Bloom said, look, if you look at learning, and I can also use this to evaluate writing, there are different levels of learning. The first level is basically you have a knowledge of something, you're aware of something, you've observed something, and to represent that you have this knowledge, you can write it out someplace else. Okay, so you can take the same information and copy it someplace else. You can remember it for an exam. But beyond that, there's comprehension, which means that you are able to summarize and you're able to understand at a deeper level. And above that, then there's application, meaning you can see how something in one place could be applied in another place. Okay. Then higher form of understanding and learning is analysis, where you're able to identify patterns. Above that is what we've referred to as synthesis, where you can take old ideas, combine them together, and create a new idea. Okay? This is again what you're doing with your literature review. You're getting a lot of perspectives on what other people have said about human motivation, and rather than simply saying this person said this and this person said this and this person, you're starting to look for patterns of comparing, contrasting. Why did this person say this? How does what this person's saying different or similar to what this person says? And finally, at the very end of the top of the pyramid, we have evaluation, where you're actually in a position, you understand it well enough to be able to say, this is a great idea, this is genius, or this is repetitive, this is redundant, this is derivative, it's not very interesting. Okay, so then you get to the point where you can actually evaluate other people's work. Okay, so that's where we're going. We're working our way up this pyramid with the idea that eventually you'll be able to synthesize and evaluate information and then present it in your papers. So the keys to success for this week is go back and look at the last feedback I gave you on your last paper. Okay, try to do the things that I said you did well, and try to avoid doing the things I said you didn't do well, and do the things that I said you didn't do them at all. Okay, so try to get better with each process, with each one. Look at the assigned readings while preparing to write. All the assigned readings from week 1 through week 4 have specific parts of the academic writing process that I want you to focus on. Okay, so you don't get to say, well, we did that last week, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. Each week should get better in all the different aspects of academic writing that we've talked about. Again, starting to work early, planning early, allowing enough time for revision is always important. It's very apparent to me when I get papers that there wasn't enough time. I'll write on this paper needs more work. This is a draft. This isn't a finished product. Well, this week it's going to be a little bit easier because you're really not trying to produce a finished product. You're simply showing me that you're doing the research necessary and thinking about how the evidence that you're finding, the articles, are going to fit into your overall literature review, which is the most important. So by the time we're finished with this literature review, you can expect to have 20 to 25 references at a minimum, maybe more. There's no limitation on how many you can use as long as they're relevant to the topic that you're working with, your thesis. So to wrap things up here, again, the focus for this week is academic writing is going to be based upon evidence, although many students come in, I would say, with the same approach this one has here. And I call this research paper light. It contains a third fewer facts, but you'd never know it. Well, unfortunately, it's fairly easy to tell that it doesn't have enough facts because I'll write on your papers, this is an opinion. If you got it from someplace else, you need to have a citation. It won't fly. I mean, you're never going to make it through this program without using the appropriate amount of peer-reviewed journal articles, citing them correctly, using your reference list, and building your argument based upon what other people have said in the published literature. Well, that's about it for this one. This is a little bit shorter than some other ones, but I wanted to get this in early so that you can enjoy your holiday and get prepared for week number 4. Goodbye and good luck.